What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 11. I'm coming in hot right there to Head Kick Radio. I have another special guest. This man is a legend. He is amazing at so many things. He's known as the crucifix and leg lock guy, so I can go ahead and get that one out of the way. But more importantly, this man is the reason that my 99% of knowledge that I already obtain of legs comes from you. So I can at least escape amateur leg locks. And his name is Javier Palomo, and he is one of my longtime instructors in Jiu Jitsu of my career. And I got to train with him again today. Javi, what's up, my buddy?
How's it going? As I said before we started recording, I wanted to say like long time no see, but you popped in, so only a few hours no see.
I know I ruined that surprise, didn't I?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm still very happy to see you.
Well, thank you, buddy. So how have you been? So I want to point out to everybody that's listening, Javi trains more than anybody I've ever known in my life. Like I'm trying to think of somebody like even in another sport that trains as much or as intense as you.
I mean, there's definitely professional guys where this is their whole everything, and I hope I'm not out training them. That'd be crazy. I still got a job.
I know. I bet. See, I'm saying I think you are, and you've been doing this for how many years now?
Oh wow!
Since your first martial art.
I mean, first martial art, we're talking like 1985, inspired by Karate Kid. Ended up doing Tang Sudo and not sticking with it at all. And then wrestling in like junior high school, and then like. Not that those aren't martial arts, but like a real martial arts experience in terms of like going to a dojo and whatnot.
For those.
that was around 1996, I think 95, 96.
95, 96, and
I started with Aikido.
Oh, Aikido.
Yeah,
I think my brother's doing that.
Is he?
I think so.
Okay. Where's he out?
He's out in Oklahoma, so it's kind of weird that a police officer, I hope you're listening, Donnie, that you're doing Aikido.
In one of the greatest wrestling states in the U.S., and he chose Aikido.
Yeah, I don't know what to say for him.
Well, better get really good at those wrist locks and disarms and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully it pays off for him as a police officer, but...
It's pretty commonplace for guys to bag on Aikido and Hapkido and whatnot, but I've actually known quite a few guys that perhaps not in a trained versus trained situation have found it that useful, but certainly in a street situation, bar situation, against somebody who doesn't know what's going on, for sure. Like you go and do a wrist lock throw with confidence against a guy who doesn't know what's going on. He's not going to take a graceful fall. It won't look like the movies, but he's probably going to go and fall down to the ground to try and protect himself a bit.
So you're saying some knowledge is better than no knowledge?
Some knowledge is better than no knowledge, and if you have the right knowledge to back up that some knowledge, you could still make that stuff work. I think I've told people this before, but if not, I went to Japan for combat wrestling. And
yeah, that was last year. Did you do it again this year?
No, okay, we'll get to that in just a second, because I'll totally lose this train of thought. But while in Japan, in Tokyo, there were a bunch of things I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Kodokan, which is the heart of judo, and see the sights and whatnot. But one of the guys I absolutely had to go train with is Imanari. I've been a fan of Imanari for as long as he's been fighting. And the first day I was there, his knee was a little banged up. He didn't know me. He didn't want to roll, and I'm like, oh man, this sucks. Like I'm not gonna be able to train with Imanari. Like not that I flew there just to see him, but regardless. So I was like, oh okay, well yeah, okay, I'll train with your guys, and then the next day, his knee was still banged up, but like I don't know whether it was just a trust thing or he's like, I have to put this foreigner in his place.
He saw what you had. He's like, I can't just be coming in here with that.
Right. So we do the slap bump. We start on the knees, and literally as soon as we bump hands, he reaches out, he grabs my hand with both of his hands, and he wrist throws me from my knees right into side control. I was just like, I literally laughed.
Was it the most impressive thing you've ever had done to you?
Not the most impressive thing, probably, but it was like he probably saw that I wasn't thinking about it, and he's like, I'm going to go for this, and if it doesn't work, no big deal. And it worked, and it's one of my fondest memories of that roll.
Oh, that's awesome.
Above and beyond the other stuff that happened to me while I was there.
Did he hit you with an Imanari roll?
He did not. No, we didn't start standing, so
okay.
That might be a little complicated.
You never know. Somebody could jump back up, middle of the roll.
It could have happened.
But yeah,
no.
So you did that when you went over there wrestling for last year's team.
Yeah. So Matt
Team
Paul.
USA.
Matt Paul. Timing wise, I don't think it worked out.
Matt was there last year with you, wasn't he?
Right. Matt went to nationals last year and qualified and ended up going to Japan for the world team, and so did I, obviously. But Matt just won nationals again this year.
Right.
I did not go down to nationals due to, one, I'm nursing an injury. That's a big factor. But the major factor, because I'm stupid and would have fought through it, the major factor is that I'm in the Masters division and it's an open qualifier. There's no requirement for me to place on the team to get a spot to compete at the national level. So the only thing that I could have done if I had gone down and actually competed would be potentially knock out somebody else in the adult division and take their spot.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
So by me not going, A, I don't risk messing myself up while I'm nursing an injury, and B, I don't have to qualify for my spot, so it would have just been an extra warm up under the rule set, and I would have gotten a chance to see all my friends and whatnot from the team, and that I regret not being able to do, but worked out in the end. And like I said, Matt went down and took gold, so 2-time national champ there.
Yeah, so we had Matt on a few episodes ago, so hopefully these listeners, if you haven't heard it, definitely go back and listen to it. But Javy, you were talking about your injury. Is it the one from San Francisco that you got when you hurt your toe?
Yeah, and realistically, wearing the shoes, it probably would have largely mitigated it. But I still having some issues in terms of like basing on it, like in a sprawl, for example, or driving off of it in side control.
It was a gross looking injury.
It may not have actually been my most grievous injury to date, but it was for sure the grodiest looking injury to date.
Oh yeah,
that was nasty.
But that's healing up, and you're getting back in there.
Yeah. I mean, I finally, literally yesterday, for the first time, I got on the mats and took my shoes off and moved around a little bit, because previously I've just been wearing my Sambo shoes, just to keep it protected when the stitches were still in it, and to kind of like keep it together and make sure that there's no risk that it's going to get twisted up or stubbed or anything. It's one of those things like we don't wear shoes in Judo or Jiu Jitsu because of Japanese tradition more so than anything else. But we wear shoes in wrestling and Sambo, and it's like every single time I stub my toe or twist something or even get mat burn on the top of my foot from driving off, I sit there and I think to myself, I'm like, God dang it! Wouldn't it just be better if we wore shoes? Like, why of all the traditions did we have to keep this one?
I mean, I am so happy you brought that up, because I've been wanting to wear shoes for the longest time, but I can't be the only guy in there wearing shoes. They'd be like, "This dude is soft.
He's soft as hell.
Can't be wearing shoes." I'm over here like, man, but the top of my feet burn from this mat. Like, come on, let me put a sock on.
I mean, it's some combination to do it right, and you get used to it. But yeah, no, like I said, it's just tradition. That's nothing more than it, really. Now there are some benefits technique wise to certain, like wrestling shoes are very, very grippy. Okay,
would that just make the heel hooks and everything so much nastier?
Well, above and beyond that, but yeah, like any shoes are going to add a degree of grip. Anything on your foot at all is going to add a degree of grip. So you definitely want to, you need your defenses to be that much better. I personally learned heel hooks in wrestling shoes. I don't know that necessarily gives me any kind of edge or anything, but it's a world of difference in terms of you're not going to be slippery and sweaty and just squirm your way out.
But did it give you
point.
a different perspective on how you gripped or how you attacked, shoe versus bare heel?
Not necessarily, although I think I put my wrist right in the same spot as where typically the top of the shoe was. For the longest time, that was just I knew that feeling, right as it grazed the top of the shoe, that meant I was in the right spot. So, but that's
about the only one.
Yeah, that's the only one that I really think of. I didn't have any particular method of holding onto the foot differently or anything like that. It was just again, no sweat, a little bit of extra grip, probably a bit of extra leverage if your shoe's a bit longer, just those extra inches on the heel and whatnot. Or not inches, millimeters probably, but, it makes a difference.
Let's jump back and dig into the Sambo and how that led you to leg locks and teaching leg locks at a lot of different places. And
well, it's funny you should say that. My initial interest in leg locks goes back like years and years and years. Probably like pro wrestling days, if we're being honest.
Like Frank Shamrock?
No, like
before that.
Like Ric Flair.
Oh, woo, the Woo King.
Yeah, we can't woo on these microphones. They just can't handle it.
That would hurt my ears and yours.
But yeah, no, I was a big fan of pro wrestling when the UFC became a thing. I knew leg locks were real. Ken Shamrock had early leg lock wins, and I got really, really deeply fascinated with the idea of like which pro wrestling holds are real. I was not, for the record, at the time studying any style of grappling. Like I was a kid in high school still.
Yeah, you're just pointing out the BS.
Yeah. I was really curious. Like, I think I've told this before, but I would go to my buddy Jeff's house and we'd watch like UFC on tape that we rented from like Ken's World of Video down the street from his house. And like some of it was like monkey see, monkey do. Let's see, like, why did that work? What's going on? We don't know what's up. Like, oh my God, the sleeper choke is real. But other elements were like, well, if I do this, what if this happens? What if that happens? So I've got like somewhere in my house, I have this old notebook of sketches of like leg locks and arm locks, really, really goofy stuff in many cases, where I'm like, I've never seen anyone do this. And I'm reading like Black Belt magazine looking for stuff like this. I'd probably be embarrassed to actually go back and find some of the goofy concepts that I came up with as like a 18-year-old kid.
So WWF back then and
WWF early like Shuto and other early Japanese sort of submission grappling focused arts.
That and Bruce Lee got you into martial arts.
Bruce Lee was a big factor. My mom told me stories for years as a kid how my dad loved Bruce Lee and would take her to like Bruce Lee movies and things like that when they were dating. And then I myself, grew up in an era where like there were like we had Samurai Sunday was a thing on the local TV stations, and there were a lot of not as much as like probably in the later era when like Jackie Chan films came to the U.S. in much greater availability and whatnot. But yeah, there were a lot of kung fu flicks, samurai flicks, things like that. So I always had sort of a fascination with martial arts as a young kid. And then like The Karate Kid came out when I was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. And it was like, oh my God, this is what you do. You go, you find some kindly old man to teach you karate. And,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And, like my mother entertained this to a degree.
Mom of the year right there.
Well, so here's the thing. Let me stress that both mom of the year, but also like the thing that upsets me most about so many aspects of what I did as a kid was my mother would let me try anything, like literally anything. And as soon as there was the slightest hint that I might not be enjoying it, it was totally okay to just stop. And it's like, oh, you don't like it? We'll stop going.
Oh, so you don't like that part of it.
Right. Like
just making you stick it out and get through it.
Right. Like maybe Taekwondo or Tangsudo, which is what I was studying as a little kid that I thought was karate, which kind of is, but yeah, like I didn't stick with Tangsudo. I don't know where I would be in my life if I had. I have only vague memories of it because I was a little kid. But ironically enough, like, so the guy that there was a gentleman teaching Tangsudo at the Park District as their karate program. My mom, I didn't know this as a kid. I didn't care. My mom knew him from high school, which was one of the reasons that she was like, oh, like I know him. I'll trust him with my kid type thing. My recollection of that class was it was very mixed groups. It wasn't like there was a bunch of little kids. So like some things, I'm little. I don't really understand what's going on. I'm expecting it to be like all wax on, wax off stuff. And it's like, let's do forms on a hardwood floor and knuckle push-ups on a hardwood floor. So yeah, needless to say, I didn't particularly care for that. Years and years later, like fast forward to like high school, college years, I've got some buddies, one of my best friends actually, both studying Tang Sudo and Hapkido at this place that I believe was called the Eagle Academy. I know Eagle is in it. I don't remember if it was Eagle Dojo or Eagle. I think it's Eagle Academy though. And I'm talking to my mom about like the fact that they're training there and everything, and I mentioned the head instructor's name, and she's like, "That's my friend from high school that you took Tang Sudo with."
Oh,
and I'm like, Jesus, small world. Yeah,
were you
all
disappointed?
These years,
like, oh, I had to learn from my mom's friend.
No, not really. I mean, it's funny because like there's that opening. God, I'm dating myself here. There's that opening scene in Karate Kid where he's like, I want to take real lessons, and the mom's like, you took lessons. He's like, not at the Y. Well, mine was not at the Park District.
That's so true. They still give lessons too at the Park District.
I mean, a lot of Park Districts have that kind of
I'm talking about here in Chicago. I saw one.
Oh, yeah.
I was kind of blown away because we didn't have anything like that where I grew up. There was no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, I'm trying to remember the first martial arts gym I ever walked into. I think I was 16 years old. It was in Moore, Oklahoma. It was either called Stars or All Stars Gym. I can't remember. I think it's called just Stars. And then at that particular time, and this kind of also, I haven't told this story before, that kind of got me like into the UFC and things like that. Cause like I already started watching the UFC, but then like I didn't really dive into it until I started going to train Jiu Jitsu for the first time. And then I ended up getting talked into a judo practice. Okay. And it was like the hardest like workout of my life. But turns out that it was one of those instructors that, made you do like all this calisthenics and everything instead of the actual moves, like just to see who would stick with it, and as a 16-year-old kid, I'm like,
this is lame.
I was like, I didn't come here to do workouts that my, high school football coach and, wrestling coach or baseball coach would put me through. I'm like, no, that's not why I signed up for this. But I remember like the first day I couldn't walk for 2 days after that because we did so much core work. I didn't even know I had muscles
didn't know
in my
you'd
core.
injured. Yeah, it was like, I think I've hurt something that I didn't know existed until now.
Yeah, I had to roll out of bed and then ask for somebody to come pick me up by the shoulders.
Wow.
Yeah, it was terrible. But that was my first impression of judo. And so then I always assumed after that for the longest time, anybody that does judo is built like a rock and hates people.
And there's definitely a lot of hard asses in judo. Let's be honest here. And it literally takes all kinds. I mean, there's clubs here in Chicago that are, very traditional, extremely intense, a lot of focus on building, next generation competitors. And then there's smaller clubs where it's just like, no, we want to have fun throwing each other around, not as formal. We're not gonna do like some CrossFit workout style, level of calisthenics and running in circles beforehand. It's gonna go all across the spectrum, just like any other, jiu-jitsu's the same way. Some guys run a crazy, hour long, super intense warm up, and then you finally get to drill or work a technique, and then it's time for rolling. And other guys are like, we're going to show you all technique, and then we're going to roll afterwards, and sing Kumbaya, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So I mean, like, well, think about it from where you started to where you are now. Even teaching, and you had to go through all those different types of classes to see which one you like to make your teaching style.
Yeah.
Like, did you just like look at some of the classes? You're like, man, I want to do this martial art, but I don't really want to go to class because these warm-ups they're like ridiculous.
So no, but, so if we're talking chronologically, above and beyond my kind of early youthful introduction to martial arts through Tang Sudo, which I couldn't tell you a single thing about it from that time. Like I have vague recollection of knuckle push-ups and doing kata that, like, I don't remember the kata. I just remember like waving my hands in the air trying to mirror what the instructor was showing.
Yeah.
But like my first real introduction to martial art, and at the time most people wouldn't have considered it martial art, was basically junior high school wrestling, which I did not ultimately stick with, in part because of I hated running stairs and I hated the intense warm-ups. I liked the technique, like the drilling of takedowns. And actually, I was, even back then, I wasn't that good at takedowns. I was already considered like a mat specialist. I was good at escaping from bottom, and I was pretty good at like, simple mat returns and leg rides and things like that. Like I had like two pretty reliable pinning combinations that I never pulled off in actual competition.
So that's wild to hear, though, to hear you say like back then you're like, oh, I didn't want to do all those things. I didn't want to run stairs. And then I see you now, and you are working harder than professional athletes.
Some, I guess. I don't know. I really hope not. Like, I hope all the guys that are hoping to make this their living are training way harder than me. And a lot of the, like, I put a lot of time in on the mat, but a lot of guys that are pros are putting like a lot of time in, lifting weights and doing supplemental cardio and things like that.
Right.
Like, let's not, just because I have a lot more check-ins at the actual martial arts gym doesn't mean I'm necessarily putting in more work. I don't know.
But mental reps are reps.
They do count for something. But like for me, a big turning point in that mental situation, it's kind of like. It's funny because now that I think about it, I guess this ties into my history and psychology more than I really realized. But so I was, like I said, I got my real start in martial arts in terms of like traditional martial arts with Aikido. I very, very rapidly, there's a long story here, so I'm going to cut it as short as possible.
No, man, take your time. Lay this thing out. Lay this thing out for the listeners. They love this stuff.
Okay, so let's set the stage. It's the mid-'90s. I graduated high school in 1995. I'm 41 years old. And the UFC had hit, but not in a big way, mind you, in like 92, 93-ish?
I think it was 93.
Yeah, like in that era. So like I didn't see it right away. Let's be very clear. I wasn't like a kid with a cable box and a dad, that wanted to watch all that kind of shit.
Yeah, I was 5.
Right. Okay, well, yeah, I was in high school. So like I was in the perfect age group to like really appreciate that.
I didn't really find it until 8th grade, 9th grade, so high school, like going into high school. So.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that's probably not an uncommon story for most of us. Like if you don't have somebody that watches it and brings you up with it, it's not necessarily something you just stumble on.
That's the point of what you're saying right here. It just wasn't that big when you in 93 to 95.
No, not yeah. It was like you have to understand like that era. Like it was still human cockfighting, there was the honest to God thought that these guys were going in there and that some of them may die.
I still feel like they're battling that stigma.
I think with some people they probably are, but with it being on television so much and being so much more high profile, and also we don't call it NHB or anything like that anymore. Like it's way more of a sport now than it is a spectacle like it was then.
Yeah, but isn't it funny? Like for example, UFC, like that one word changes it because like if we called it instead of U, like E, like Extreme Fighting Championship, like people would be like, hold up here.
Maybe.
Up here. But
if you just called it EFC, people would be fine with it. Like,
yeah. But then when, you get those people with the suit and ties and they're like, what's that E stand for?
Right.
And like extreme? What? No. But I think that's that one word, ultimate. Everybody's like, oh, okay, ultimate. That's not bad.
Right. Yeah. But it just works out that it's the
like names mean something. That's crazy, I think. But
No, like it does for marketing and perspective and things like that. But like I said, when I started getting into it, like that was the end of high school. So we were probably already on like UFC 3, 4, 5. I can't remember the exact timeline.
When Hoist was taken over.
Well, yeah, like all my early memories of it are like Hoist Gracie, who 100% I didn't see it live or anything like that. I saw it on videotape. But like Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock, God, there's so many old school names. I'd have to go back and like look at Wikipedia to really remember who. But like once I got hooked on it, it was like, oh, we're gonna see everything,
Yeah. So that motivates you to go like find something else.
No, strangely enough, I was in a weird place in terms of like the age that I was at. And it wasn't really available, and there were other factors at hand, like money.
Oh, that's always a big one.
Yeah, but so I knew at the time there were jiu-jitsu schools downtown Chicago. There wasn't one near where I lived at the time. My buddy Jeff, whose basement I would wrestle around in, was way more interested in finding legitimate Gracie jiu-jitsu. Like that was his personal quest. But the idea of driving from his house in like Bensonville to like downtown Chicago was still pretty daunting at like the age of 17, 18.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So flash forward a little bit, and this is a thought in the back of both of our minds. And like at this point, I'm doing other martial arts a little bit. Like I said, I'd done some Aikido and whatnot. But I ended up finding a Carlson Gracie school that was still out in the suburbs. It was in Bloomingdale, in fact. Jeff Neal was one of the teachers there, and Carlson Gracie Jr. And I told my buddy Jeff about it, and he immediately went there, signed up, like mission accomplished. And I tried it, didn't like it. Don't need to get into all the reasons of why. Also, didn't really have the money for it. But he started training there, and he hit me up, and he was like, "Hey, you know that movie you like with Jeff Speakman, The Perfect Weapon?" And I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I've never seen it.
This is a legendary action film from my era. I'm like, yeah, of course, I love that movie. We've probably watched it 4,000 times together. Like Jeff Speakman should have been right up there with Jean-Claude Van Damme and
I know Jean-Claude. If you throw Steven Seagal out there,
and Steven Seagal, yeah.
Now you're talking my childhood because I had to watch those movies with Dad.
There you go. Did Dad like Chuck Norris and Don the Dragon Wilson flicks too?
Walker Texas Ranger.
There you go. Yeah, all the old school karate guys and whatnot. That was the 80s and 90s era leading up to all this. But Jeff Speakman made this film, and he was a Kempo guy. But one of the, in my opinion, iconic scenes of it is he pulls out some Eskrima sticks and beats up a couch as a warm up to then go and beating up some dudes with them. And it's really
That's pretty aggressive, sir, beating up a couch.
Oh yeah. It's a weird scene, but it is what it is. But I was really fascinated by the way he used two sticks simultaneously. And I'd always thought sword fighting was cool as a kid, and when you don't have swords, you use sticks. And here's a guy with using actual sticks to beat the crap out of dudes. So those scenes in the movies where he's using the sticks, I was really, really fascinated about it. Didn't at the time really know what it was. Did some research, found out it was Eskrima was actually wrong. Eskrima and Kempo have a weird relationship to each other that historically American Kempo. But anyhow, so. He's doing jiu-jitsu, and he comes to find out there's a dude that does that stick thing here. And he's like, you should come and check it out. And I'm like, okay, I will. And that's what really got me hooked, was finding a guy that taught Filipino martial arts, which is all stick and knife fighting, and also taught Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is a lot of wrist locks and throws. But at the time, Gracie/Brazilian jiu-jitsu, mainly the culture of it didn't appeal to me. It was not what I was looking for. Even though I had a wrestling background, and even though I would literally take dudes down in my jiu-jitsu class, and they'd be like, okay, the technique's done, and I'm like, no, I could do so much more from down here. All those things I figured out in my buddy's basement. What would Hoist Gracie do here from here? So I had that interest in it, but I just didn't like what I was exposed to at the time. So I kind of stayed away from the grappling scene a bit for a while there. I was very focused on swords and knives, and
doing Aikido.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'd gone out of Aikido. I actually got into Aikido for pretty weird reasons, but I'd gotten away from Aikido. It was offered at my college. My instructor was really cool. I liked the way she taught and everything, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for, and I knew that.
So this is when you got into Kempo then?
I didn't actually directly study Kempo. Sorry.
So I'm trying to figure out, it brought you to the gym. This guy the guy
that did the movie, Jeff Speakman, does American Kempo.
Okay.
Which has elements of Filipino martial arts, Eskrima, in it. I was looking for that sword and stick style of fighting. I thought it was really, really cool. I liked samurai movies, and I liked Star Wars and things like that.
Right.
So swords were just really cool, and that was what I was looking for. And that's what got me in more seriously to martial arts, was studying Filipino martial arts with stick, knife, and sword.
Well, see, that's what makes my
jiu-jitsu.
heart smile, is hearing you say one of the the best wrestlers I know, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners I've ever been on the mat with. One of the best judo people, teaching, you taught me hip tosses and stuff, when I first started out. But it makes my heart smile to think that you got talked into going to a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym because some dude there knew how to fight with sticks.
So you're still thinking the story is going to end up how you think, but it's not.
I'm hoping it does.
No,
I'm hoping that you're just like quietly also this really badass stick fighter too now, because that got you into it all.
I mean, I definitely still remember quite a bit about like stick, knife, and sword.
That's what I want to hear, because that because you're so awesome at these other.
I'm probably not that awesome
facets
anymore at those. I mean, I don't practice them too regularly. I break out my sticks every once in a while, and I'll take them through, just like certain exercises and patterns and whatnot. But
that's what led you into these other martial arts.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, even though you had wrestling, and
massively
you
lit a fire
it later as well. But
yeah, no, I'd always been super fascinated by martial arts. Like it was always a thing that I wanted to do. Like, I grew up in an era where like karate movies and ninjas were just everywhere, just absolutely everywhere. So yeah, like it was always something I wanted to do, and it was also always something that like I thought it was super hard, because I had that early memory from childhood probably. I thought it was super hard, and I would never be able to do it, and it was expensive, and like especially like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the early 90s was crazy expensive when you're like a struggling college student / high school student.
Right.
So yeah, like that aspect just wasn't in the cards. But like while I was interested in grappling, I was way more interested in weapons and striking and things like that at the time. And training with my initial instructor, it exposed me to a lot of stuff, and I studied through seminars and books and videotapes and cross-training. I studied so many martial arts, like an embarrassing amount of just random shit, okay? And I'm not saying it was shit
right.
like bad technique, sorry, just random stuff.
It had your attention though.
It was my obsession. It was absolutely.
But let's be real, it still is today, isn't it? Like,
It
you're always showing, hey, look at this technique off YouTube. That I mean, it's usually somebody credible doing it, but
right. No, it's just like that's the way I am.
It's just evolved. I think a lot of us do it.
Yeah, I've literally traveled around the world for it. Like I can legit say that now.
You can, because you went to Japan.
Yeah, before I used to only be able to say that I'd travel across the country for it, which was also true to an extreme degree. But
have you been to South America, do jiu-jitsu or anything in Brazil?
No, like crazy enough that you bring that up. I have two coaches that are both Brazilian, Luis Claudio and Thiago Veiga, and they regularly take students down for training camps down in Brazil once or twice a year, and this just in a couple of days, everyone's going to be leaving to go to the training camp, and I'm not going with. So instead I'm the guy who's stuck at home and has to teach the classes.
And these are the two you're a brown belt under.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. I'm an LCCT brown belt.
So tell the listeners here what you're belted in, and like what you're, or at least standing in that certain martial art, because like it's impressive, and you all should hear this.
Like if I didn't know I was me, like if I heard somebody list off like all the belts and stuff, I'd be like, this guy's probably full of shit.
I should have asked you for a list so I can read it off, because I would have done a whole intro with it, and it would have been
it's cool, man.
phenomenal.
I don't need no long intros.
Yeah, you do.
So I have 3 black belts. I'm a black belt in Judo. I'm a black belt in 2 different systems of Jiu-Jitsu, Kakuto-Ryu and Danzen-Ryu. Those are both like, the Danzen-Ryu is a fairly old traditional school, comes from Hawaii. And then Kakuto-Ryu is a modern eclectic style that was developed by my instructor based off his own studies of not Brazilian, but of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu.
Was it like a form of the original Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, or?
This is a very complicated question.
Oh, okay.
When somebody talks about original Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, like in a scholastic sense, we're talking about like sword and spear and horsemanship and all kinds of stuff. A lot of technique retained strictly in forms, no sparring.
So this is what we would call in modern day a street fight.
No, that's what you would call like Civil War cosplaying, like dudes that do Civil War reenactment and dudes that do like real jiu-jitsu.
But back then, were there dire consequences? Did the person die? Like, was it one of those like a
I mean,
sword fight kind of example?
If we're talking about like old schools of jiu-jitsu, we're going back to an era where like actual samurai and warriors were training in this art because they needed it on the battlefield, or they needed it, at the sake house, whatever it may be.
Right.
So yeah, like we're talking about an era where technique was really tested and really proven out, but maybe not decimated, anywhere near as well.
Yeah. We don't have to tangent that far. We can get back to your instructor that you learned from and his
Right.
traditional style.
So when I say traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, like there's real traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, which goes all the way back to like samurai era stuff, and that's like fairly obscure here in the United States. Then you have like more modern Japanese style jiu-jitsu, which is a lot of wrist locks and throws and counter holds and things of that nature. And a lot of that stuff, if we're being honest, is developed from like the Goshin Jitsu of Judo, which are the self-defense techniques of Judo, which are not necessarily the competition techniques. So you see like a lot of guys coming back from Japan, veterans that came back, they had learned Judo or whatnot, and then, they suddenly come back and they're in America teaching, and like they want to include strikes and wrist locks and things of that nature that are banned in the competition. They don't necessarily want to have any direct tie to Judo in that way, and Judo's governing bodies. So, they call it Jiu-Jitsu. They're returning it to their roots. So you have a long period of time where there's various styles of jiu-jitsu that are truly descended from traditional Japanese methods. Then you have various styles of jiu-jitsu, I'm doing air quotes right now, that are really more or less descended from Judo. And then you have Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is also itself directly descended from Judo, despite the name. So I was studying that second flavor of jiu-jitsu, which was, ultimately go back far enough, it definitely going to trace to somebody probably that did Judo. But again, like we don't tend to teach gun disarms and things like that in most Judo classes. But if you in the 90s, if you went to a Japanese jiu-jitsu school, that was a pretty standard thing. Wrist locks, gun disarms, knife disarms. How do you counter a bear hug? Things like that.
Do you think that's a lost trait that we should still be doing that, or do you believe that we're doing the right thing by bypassing it in most schools?
Well, I believe it depends on what you actually want out of your training time. So that's first and foremost. Not everyone comes to the school looking for the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Like if you went to a school looking for self-defense and you were like being taught butt scooting and leg locking, you're probably not gonna stick around.
Yeah, because you're not gonna be butt scooting out in the streets. That's for sure.
But if, by the same token, if you wanted to get really, really good at sport jiu-jitsu and you ended up at like, some self-defense school, you're also in the wrong spot. Like what do you want out of your training time? There's definitely schools that retain a lot of self-defense technique, Krav Maga, schools, a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools that do still teach a lot of street self-defense and counter grabs and things like that, where it's not as focused on modern sport and using the rules and things of that nature. It's what you want.
I think Tom DeBlas posted a meme the other day that I laughed at and hit the like button on because I believe it too. And it was basically saying if you just go learn jiu-jitsu for sport jiu-jitsu, but yet you can't use it or know how to use it in a street fight, then it does you no good. Do you think that's the truth? Like, do you think that everybody that does jiu-jitsu or anything, any martial art, like if you can only do it in sport, what good is it?
Well, okay, so I'm of two minds on this, which isn't saying that I'm like wishy-washy on it. Just like I said, it depends on what you want. I have no problem with somebody being an incredible sports shooter that has literally no interest in like going to war and killing people. Right. Similarly, I have no problem with someone just being like a sport jiu-jitsu practitioner who has no real interest in like self-defense and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. One is a sport, one is a self-defense lexicon of techniques. Okay? Now that said, and I think this has been proven out time and time again in grappling in general, jiu-jitsu in specific though, because that's what most recent examples I can think of are. Listen, if you are a blue belt in jiu-jitsu and you can handle the average dude that comes in as a white belt off the street without getting injured, you're probably going to be able to handle an average dude on the street without getting injured, okay? There's some caveats to that. Like if you never practice takedowns, you never practice any kind of striking defense or how to close the distance safely, you might have a rough day. Everyone's got a puncher's chance. You might get knocked out on the first swing. Okay. But in a general sense, if you've got enough skill to get to a clinch or get to a takedown, take it to the ground where you spend all your time training, you're probably going to be fine. And I say probably because obviously striking is a factor, and there are people that do games that aren't conducive to that.
Yeah.
But it's not like I don't know, like a top competitor like Keenan Cornelius. Okay, like nobody's gonna accost him in the bar and he's gonna be like, oh I can't do my jiu-jitsu because I don't have my gi to do worm guard. Like that's never gonna happen. You know, like if that happens, it's probably like a setup for a joke on YouTube. No, Keenan Cornelius is going to take some bum in the street down to the ground, mount him, strangle him or punch him. You know, like it's going to be another day at the office.
Right. Well, see, that leads me to a two-part question of like this original part. Like, you know, like you're saying, some people want to learn the self-defense, some want to learn the sport. So the first part of that question is it like, should every instructor, or most instructors then I should say, should they be teaching both aspects of self-defense and the sport of it in the sequences they're doing? Like, example, like if this guy has a weapon, you take it at this point, you know, the controls here, yada yada. And then the second part of that question is things like combat jiu-jitsu now for people that, you know, let's say they don't train striking and they don't have a stand-up game. Is it important once you get them down in dominant jiu-jitsu positions or wrestling positions to be able to land strikes? Like, should that be taught? Like, you know, because you can do that without actually hitting people. You can just, you know, just place your hand on them like pow, pow, you know, without even, you know, hurting them.
So, okay. So first of all, let's not to be that guy, but let's remove jiu-jitsu from the equation here. Let's just talk like a general sense of grappling.
Okay.
Because there's a lot more to the grappling world than just jiu-jitsu, obviously.
Right.
As a grappler, if you're looking to use your skills for real in the streets, there are certain things you should be doing. Okay, you should have at least some familiarity with striking concepts. You need to know how to close the distance. You need some degree of takedowns. You may not need like 40 black belt level judo throws, okay, but you need to be able to, like, if your whole art is practiced on the ground and you can't make it go there against somebody who doesn't know anything, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Okay. But realistically, especially competitors, like especially guys that are good competitors, if you're competing all the time and you're practicing your art against trained guys that are trying to stop you from doing what you do best and you're having success, then somebody who doesn't know anything, like, there's a huge gap right there, that massive skill gap that your skills should be able to compensate for. Like, the amount of stuff that guy doesn't know versus the amount of stuff you know is massive. And like I said, there's always that puncher's chance element, but, you know, I'm going to, like, if I'm a betting man, I'm strongly favoring the guy who's got, like, 2 stripes on his white belt versus the guy who's, you know, puffing out his chest and doesn't know shit.
Right.
I don't think every instructor has to teach self-defense, because, again, like, as an instructor, like, okay, we can break this down in, like, 2 basic situations here.
Okay.
You're either teaching self-defense because presumably you were taught it, you see value on it, and you want to pass that along to your students who may also find value in it, and you may have that sort of traditionalist sense where this is what I learned and I want everyone to know it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, okay? But there's also nothing wrong with me, you know, not me, but like somebody saying, like, actually I learned this stuff or didn't learn it at all. I don't see any value of it. And by the way, my students aren't paying me for that. They want just sport, okay? Both of those options can exist simultaneously, and nothing's wrong with that, okay? The only time anything really gets wrong with it is when somebody says, well, what you're doing isn't real jiu-jitsu because reason A or B. And then that's when, you know, worthless internet arguments start.
See, I don't like those arguments because it's, to me, like, there is no worthless jiu-jitsu, whether it's, you know, sport or self-defense or just basic jiu-jitsu. Like, if it works, then it's real.
Right.
You know, like, you know, those, like, the fake moves right now, that hot hashtag is going on and people are doing things that shouldn't work but somehow
like
do.
Pro wrestling style moves.
Yeah. I think the 10th Planet System's calling it, what, fake news or something. But, like, those kind of things, like, it's one of those deals, like, yeah, it's so ridiculous, but if it worked, it worked.
Right. I mean, you know, like, there's, listen, I can legitimately say this, and I haven't replicated it since. I 100%, as a transition out of a knee bar, one time in a roll against a guy who knew what he was doing, put a guy in a figure 4 leg lock, like a Ric Flair looking figure 4 leg lock. I can show you how I did it. I can explain it in detail. I have never hit it again in a roll, and I would never pretend like, oh, that's a thing you can just do.
Did it get the tap?
Yeah, I did.
That's wild, because it looks like there's so much room when they lightly have those things put on in the ring.
When you put it on for real, it's kind of like a combination like ankle lock knee bar. It's pretty bizarre. But again, like how do you get into that? Well, like I'm not even saying like I wasn't trying to find a way. It was just like we spun and turned, and his leg went here, and my leg went, and it was like boom, and locked it in. And sure enough, it worked. And again, from screwing around in my buddy's basement, I knew that thing hurts.
Right.
Okay. Like I knew how to actually apply pressure once it was there. I just never thought in a million years you could actually do it. And by literal random happenstance, it happened in a roll one time. And like I said, I'd probably never be able to do it again, even though I've walked it back mentally and been like, okay, this had to happen, and this had to happen, and then this happened, and then yes.
Did you jump up and woo? That would have just put the cherry on the top there.
I didn't jump up because I had to disentangle my leg from underneath his legs, but I emoted audibly.
So you have 3 black belts.
Sure, getting back to that.
Because I'm telling you, the listeners want to hear this. So you have 3 black belts.
I guess.
So now,
yeah, I got 3 black belts. I'm a brown belt in LCCT Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is in Rickson Gracie's lineage, and I'm a brown belt in modern arnis. Master Remy Presas, who's passed away, and I'll probably never pursue any higher degree in that belt as a result of that. I'm a certified instructor in catch wrestling. I'm a national champion in both Sambo and combat wrestling, and a world champion in combat wrestling. I've got some other sort of random coaching credentials due to classes I've attended, and then theoretically somewhere in my house I've got like a binder just full of certificates and stuff saying that I attended this camp or did this seminar or things like that.
I want to talk about that too, because that's impressive, because you've trained with like all the hot names like the John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, Eddie Cummins, Gary Tonin.
I've trained with, or at least been in the room with, a lot of guys.
Yeah, and then, even the guys back on the other coast, back in LA, from like the 10th Planet guys to Machado, I believe. Have you been with Machado?
I was in Japan on the last team trip out to see John Jacques, so I actually missed out on that opportunity. And I also missed out, we used to have a gentleman here, Scott Goddard, who was Jean Jacques black belt, and he had brought him out for a seminar, and I couldn't go to that one, and I was like, no, I've wanted to, oh well, no big deal, I'm sure it'll happen again. And then Goddard moved away, and Jean Jacques hasn't been back. So that has not happened again. But no, I've never had the pleasure of training with Jean Jacques directly. I've definitely trained.
And you're also the guy who brings a lot of people even through like 10th Planet. I don't know what you do for LCCT, but like James Klingman, that was a great seminar you brought to us. And if
I see a guy who's got talent and is approachable, that knows something that I don't, and seems to not be an asshole, I have an absolute interest in working with him. So I've been, I guess, blessed with the fact that I've met a lot of really good people in martial arts, and quite a few of them are really good at stuff that I'm either not good at, or where I'm like, this guy can make me better at that.
Right. So everybody has like the list of people that they've trained with, at least so far. If you've done it for a few years, you're like, oh man, this is my Mount Rushmore.
No, like, check my Instagram.
Out of all of it, like it doesn't even have to be jiu-jitsu, but like, was it Imanari? Like, which one kind of blew you away that kind of, shocked you a little bit, and you just like man,
like who did I get the most out of? Well, or like what was like the most impressive?
Yeah, let's do the most out of person, or then the person that was like such a legend, like you didn't feel like yourself when you're meeting them. You know what I mean? Like the outer body experience. I
probably had the biggest fanboy moment with Rickson, if we're being honest. Or Marcelo. God, like either of those are
some good ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually unfair. Those are so easy.
That's true, but I mean, like if you met him or trained, a seminar with him or anything, like that's a bucket list kind of thing if you're deep into the sport.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like we're still at that point where most of the guys that are legends in the sport and whatnot are actually like super accessible in the grand scheme of things. Like it's not hard to go to New York City and train with Marcelo. It's a little harder to train with Hickson if he's not at a seminar or something like that, but still certainly not impossible. You just got to know kind of the right people, have the right kind of money sometimes. But yeah, like you name any modern champion, and it's an easy Google search to find out what academy he's at, and it's usually pretty easy to go in there, drop in, and maybe even get a role with him, if not at least take a class with him. I know guys that have trained with like George St. Pierre, and it's no big deal. He's at Henzo's or he's at TriStar, and yeah, it's normal.
Yeah, but I mean, to the average person, that seems pretty.
It probably
pretty
seems
impressive.
Like, to be fair, it probably seems more difficult to do than it actually is. Like, when I was younger, I had built up this weird thing in my head. Like looking back at it, I still can't believe that I used to think this, where like I had gone to like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and all these somewhat less important sounding states. Like, no offense to any of my friends out there, don't get me wrong, but like when people talk about like the big cities, they're talking about like Chicago and New York and LA, and I'd somehow built it up in my mind that like a trip to New York or a trip to LA was going to be like this massively expensive thing, and I had to save so much money and this, that, and the other. And like years later, the first time I went out to LA, I'm like, this was like a trip to anywhere else. Like the airfare was actually cheaper here than it is to a lot of smaller airports, because it's such a major hub.
Too,
yeah. It's like, oh wow, it cost me $89 to get there and back on like a Spirit airfare.
Yeah, exactly. See, a lot of it. I mean, well, jiu-jitsu is the same way. We just put these barriers up in our head, thinking we can't do something.
That's 100% psychological. Like if there's somebody like, okay, there's exceptions to this. I mean, like I said, I'm 40. I'm not struggling for cash like I was when I was 18. If there's something you want to do, and you have reasonable means and some sense in your head, you can probably do it in terms of like in terms of meeting some famous person in jiu-jitsu, training with them. It's not that hard. I know countless guys that have done it, like that wanted to go take like a week-long vacation in California and just train all day, all night with all these famous jiu-jitsu guys. That's actually pretty simple to do. Hell, there's like fighter houses in certain cities where it's like, yeah, you're going to pay this much. You're going to be hanging out with a bunch of like-minded individuals. Maybe not the most private situation in the world, but yeah, it's way cheaper than your average Airbnb or hotel. And then when it really comes down to it, you travel with a couple of people, and an Airbnb doesn't cost that much either. Right.
I mean, but do you think that's one of the best perks and the best things of jiu-jitsu is that everybody is accessible? Like, if you want to go train with somebody you just either pay the gym fee for the drop-in or whatever it is, and you're like, hey, maybe I'll catch him here. Yeah. Something as simple as that, or even just contact him and be like, hey, can we do a seminar, private or whatever?
Like here's the thing. There's no one, I don't want to misspeak, because there's plenty of guys that I want to train with still, that the timing and opportunity just hasn't worked out yet for one reason or another. Okay, and that's across multiple disciplines. There's Sambo, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Shuai Jiao, all kinds of different guys that I've wanted to work with, where it's just like, I can't do it this month, timing, money, whatever it may be. But if you really have like a goal in mind, and you're not trying to like train with like the top 20 famous, most famous people in the world type thing, I feel like it's super easy. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to talk about other people's stuff. But like at some point, I'm going to go back out to New York and see all of my friends in New York. And incidentally, while I'm out in New York, I'll probably see Henzo. I'll probably see the Meow Brothers. I'll probably see some of the guys in Danaher's squad. I'm going to go to Marcelo's gym. And, like, the last time I was at Marcelo's gym, like, Bernardo Faria was there. I didn't go to see him, but it was cool that he was there. Like, multiple-time world champion.
Yeah, it's one of those accidental run-ins. See, I want to say that really quickly, too, about you, is, like, that's what's so cool, is because everybody in, the jiu-jitsu community, which is most of the listeners, they understand, like, the 10th Planet leg lock system and how that took off, especially, when the first EBIs were, blasting away and everybody was like, oh, who's going to hang with all these leg locks? And then here comes the Danaher guys and you've trained with both of them. You've done seminars with their guys. You've trained with them. You've studied the 10th Planet system. You studied their system, even on their, DVDs and, things like that stuff they put out. You're constantly learning from everybody, but
I'm friendly with a lot of those guys.
And that's what's so cool. I want to say that we get here in Chicago is when you come back, you teach what you learn from both of them. And you're like, hey, I like this one works, or this one works. And then we get like that version from you. So we get like this third version, in person that a lot of people all over the country or world don't even get.
Well,
and that's what's crazy to me is like, I feel like we have this hidden gem here with you. Like in the gym, I'm like, we're learning from, somebody who is
from all the sources.
Yeah. It's like all the sources, but it's like somebody who's, super badass that doesn't get, that recognition of like a great, practitioner or something. And that's what blows my mind. I'm like, I feel like we don't even here sometimes respect you for how awesome you are for what you do for us.
Okay, well, thank you for saying that. My head is swelling. These earphones aren't gonna fit in a minute here. But like here's the thing. Okay, and this is like you're talking leg locks right now, but this is true of like all grappling. As a general rule, like it's not like it's pretty easy to get access to really good dudes, which is why I can legitimately say I've trained with dozens of world champions and Olympians in various sports, like judo, wrestling, world champion sambo players, world champion combat wrestling guys, world champion jiu-jitsu. Like, that's not abnormal for me.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's not that abnormal in the community. Okay? What is I don't even want to say abnormal, but what is slightly more complicated is when we have, like political rivalries between different gyms and whatnot, and that sometimes does cause problems, of course, where like certain people don't want to train with other people, or more to the point, above and beyond that, certain people don't want you training with other people.
It sounds like a bad girlfriend experience or something.
Well,
don't be friends with your friends.
Jiu-Jitsu is still occasionally very tribal, and the tribalism comes out especially when competition is a factor, and even more so above and beyond gold medals when there's money on the line. Like things amp up an extra degree there. So, for example, while you wouldn't know it from training in our gym, there's definitely some guys in the 10th Planet system that probably don't like the fact I train with guys from Henzo's, and I don't give a shit. Like,
yeah, it's all our own journey,
right? I mean, like
I'm just happy. Like when I meet people, it doesn't matter, who you could train in the mall for all I care. Like if you told me you did jiu-jitsu, I'm like, good for you. Like,
right?
Because I know what jiu-jitsu can do for people.
And I mean, I feel like that's the right attitude to have. But yeah, like some people are, like I said, more tribal, more competitive. It's a them or us type situation, and I try to avoid that kind of stuff. I generally consider it petty. I do understand certain circumstances where like I would personally feel very awkward. In fact, let's lay the cards on the table. I'm in a reasonably awkward situation right now. I do train at a lot of gyms. Okay. I have to actually count them on my fingers to keep track of them.
I know, that's why I was saying, like, nobody, like, that I see anyway, trains as much as you, because it's like, boom, you're here, boom, you're here, boom, you're here. I'm like, we're still in the same 24-hour period.
Well, it probably doesn't. It probably seems like a lot because you're only seeing it in bits and pieces. It's actually just a pretty regimented schedule. I train basically 7 days a week, typically 2 times a day. Every once in a while I'll get in 3. Every once in a while I'll only do 1. I don't take days off unless I have to because of illness or injury. And I don't want anyone to think like that I'm going like 110% comp rolls, balls to the wall every single day, because that's not how it is.
Yeah, that's just not sustainable
right,
for the human body.
Like I do roll a lot, don't get me wrong. Like I basically roll almost every class. I think there's only 2 that I don't regularly roll in. And even those sometimes I do. But like I know how to modulate my my levels and control things and not burn myself out pretty well. I've been doing this a long time, so I worked my way up. Actually, I worked my way back up to this degree of training, and I'm at that spot where I can handle it. So
yeah. Well, so like I mean, if a lot of your day is training, is a lot of the rest of your day, I mean, besides work, because you're talking, you do have a regular job. But
I have an irregular job. Let's
well, and a regular, but you still have a
right.
a provide for a job too.
Yeah, let's lay this out. So, like, my typical day during the week, I have a night job now. I work graveyard shift. A reason that I took that position, like, it was closer to home. They were going to offer me more money. I was going to save a lot of money in terms of travel and time and other expenses, but also it would allow me to train during the days, and all I had to do was sacrifice continuous hours of sleep. I don't get much sleep normally anyhow, like not deliberately. I literally feel sick if I sleep more than 6 hours at a time.
Oh,
okay. Wow. Yeah, like it's kind of weird, honestly. Every once in a while, I'll like crash out and get like 7 hours of sleep, and I'll be like, oh God, I feel so rested.
Sleeping in.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a normal night.
I feel so rested / lazy. But no, so it's not uncommon for me to only sleep like 4 hours at a crack. So when I decided to switch to graveyard, my plan was I get home, I get off work at 6 a.m. I get home and I'm usually asleep by 7. I get up by 11:30 so that I can head to the gym for noon classes. I'm at the gym for a couple of hours, usually back to sleep by 3, and then I need to be up by about 5 o'clock to then get to whatever evening class I'm going to that day. My noon classes are pretty consistently, almost always during the week. This is at LCCT, both because it's awesome and also because it's super close to my house. So it's not like I'm driving a half hour to get like an hour of training in and then driving a half hour home to pass out. No, it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes up the road. Easy to get to, easy to get back from. So that's super convenient. And I'm lucky that there are actually several friendly gyms not too far from my house that I can work out at, although not all of them are super conveniently located.
Right. So you got LCCT, 10th Planet.
So I've got LCCT headquarters, whatever you want to call it, in Schaumburg is the main LCCT location, or the older LCCT location. Then we have our newer gym in Barrington, which the head instructor is Tiago Vega, 4th degree black belt under Hickson. And I teach there on, I train there regularly. I teach there on Friday nights. I train, of course, at 10th Planet Chicago. I'm typically there Thursday night and Saturday during the day. I teach Leg Lock Club on Saturday at 10th Planet Chicago. I teach at our team Deerfield. The Redzovics and their affiliation have been great friends of mine for a number of years now. I've got a really good relationship with Professor Barry and Tom from that school. And my addition to their program is predominantly I teach a very heavily influenced by Riley Bodycomb and Vlad Kulikov, a no-gi approach to grappling that's based largely on Sambo principles. I mix in some other stuff as well, but yeah, like my R dojo class is very focused on like taking guys that maybe don't have the best stand-up and teaching them some stand-up, introducing them to leg locks, a lot of dynamic entries, things that Riley's pretty well known for.
I was going to say, like, I forgot to mention Riley and the whole leg lock schema thing and the whole top rock stuff. Like, I forgot all about that until you just brought that back up again. I apologize.
No. That's the downside of knowing so many people. It's hard to keep track of the list.
But I was going to say, that's just a whole nother, like, set of systems that, you and him have been practicing putting together and at least that you've incorporated from him and stuff like that.
Yeah, Riley's a huge influence on my game and my way of thinking. Certainly not exclusively, like there's things that he do that I don't do, and there's things that he do that I do. So like it's just a matter of finding what works well for me. And I try, like, because I understand his reasoning, and we're like, he's not that much larger than me. We share similar attributes and grappling skills. It's usually like I can integrate the majority of what he shows me pretty rapidly, it plays well with my game. So that's one of the reasons I've always, once we started training together, I'm like, oh yeah, this is definitely one of my dudes.
Yeah.
So I teach the R dojo class, and we also have an hour-long drilling class that's not like instruction. It's just like, like go do your thing, and I'm just going to drill sergeant a little bit while I'm doing my thing. And then regularly, prior to my injury, I would do judo down at Midwest Judo, and I haven't been back there recently because of my injury, and I'm just very averse to working out with a bunch of guys that are prone to foot sweeps while my foot's injured.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad idea waiting to happen.
And then Dennis Dombrow runs 3D MMA. That's also not that far from my house. It's and I train there on Mondays, and like, not to like totally fanboy on Dennis and his guys, but like, I love working with Dennis. Dennis is one of the black belts at LCCT that I worked with regularly when I was working my way up in the ranks. Like Dennis presided over like my brown belt test. Like love Dennis. But I went in for a class recently, and they just kind of happened to be doing like wall wrestling, which is something that, only typically is taught to MMA fighters. And I'm like, is this what you do every Monday? Like, is it all like wall wrestling is it all like wrestling and cage work basically? He's like, yeah, every Monday. I'm like, I'm going to be here every Monday now. Okay. Cause not that I don't want to study any of the other stuff that I'm working on, mind you, but it's like, I'm not an MMA fighter. I haven't spent any appreciable amount of time in a cage other than screwing around a little bit and been shown a thing or two here and there. Like, this is a skill deficit that I have. And it's unfortunate because I do work with a number of MMA fighters.
Yeah. And
that's a skill that I need to be able to do well for their benefit. And it's also an area of expertise in grappling that I'm personally lacking in. And like literally working with his guys who, in terms of grappling experience, are way less experienced than me, but are way more experienced in that particular niche. I was like, oh yeah, this is different. Like, I knew it was different, but like, this is so different, and they're way ahead of me in terms of like their wall wrestling and certain stand-ups that are used heavily in MMA and things like that. And I'm like, I want to learn this. I need to know this. Monday, you say? I'll be here on Mondays from now on.
It's probably also nice too to mix it up from doing the traditional stuff that you're always doing, and even though there's different sequences and all that, like, it's probably nice to like, oh, this is something totally different, more MMA style. But that I want to wrap our episode up with probably this question, maybe one more. But like, if you could go back, if everything was as popular as it is now, and you could put yourself as a 25-year-old Jav.
Oh gosh.
Like, and speaking of this wall wrestling, like, would you jump more into MMA training?
Probably, but not definitely. Like, are we talking about like I get to come flash forward as a 25-year-old to like
not with all your experience that you have now? I'm talking.
No,
like,
I'm just
the
like
love and the drive. Like, would you?
That's unchanged. Like the question I have is like, the technique has changed from when I was 25 versus how old I am now.
That's true.
Okay,
it's a lot
so
different.
we're talking about the way like cage wrestling, for example, was 16 years ago. The wisdom of MMA wrestling 16 years ago, wildly different.
Yeah, no, so that's why I was equating it. Like, it's still in today's time. So, like, you have your TJ Dillashaw as your champ, like those kind of guys. Like, those martial artists are the champions right now. It's, you put yourself in 2018 as a 25-year-old Jav. Like, would you be like, oh, this is something I want to pursue?
100%. I mean, that's always been sort of a goal in the back of my head that I didn't ultimately pursue to its fullest. I got a little bit distracted along the way. Like, I never thought I was going to be like a UFC champion or anything, but I did think that before now I would have stepped in the ring and done actual MMA by now.
Yeah.
And I may yet.
But is that a different feeling? Because you are one of the few people I can personally ask this question who's been in there with a lot of, high-level black belts and this and that. Because I know you can hang. So when you realized you could hang, did that like kind of change things for you? Like your mindset on like, oh, okay, like make you want to jump deeper into it, or
no,
or like did it make you just
feel
more confident in what you were doing, or how does that work?
It kind of depends on how, like, so like when you say I can hang, like it depends on what it is. Okay. So like in the grand scheme of things, like talking of my overall abilities, I am, as I said previously, like I'm a mat wrestler. I'm a Newaza guy. I'm a ground grappler. I've got decent stand up, but I'm probably not ever going to win like a judo world title. I'm not that good at judo in the grand scheme of things. Like you have to understand, there's so many levels to this, and I'm nowhere near that Olympian level. So like my ability to hang with, say, a top tier judo guy is way lower than my ability to hang with, like a really good jiu-jitsu guy. Not because like I'm saying there's like judo's better or anything like that. It's just like my skill, the skill level is different for me. So with that in mind, like when I've been able to hang with somebody that maybe I didn't think I would be able to, like my initial thought is like, oh, this guy's famous.
Well, see, like I want to point that out, like especially because I still have that, just being a few years into it, I still look at people. Good examples like when Orchard came down, and I was like, oh, I get a chance to roll with this guy. Mm-hmm. There's no way I'm hanging with him. I mean, and he proved that, but like I still got to get in there and do it. But I mean, like the thing that I realized is I was like, oh, okay, like the only thing different really is the technique and the experience that this person has, because he's not any stronger than somebody my size, like Maurice or somebody in the gym. That's just,
he doesn't have superpowers,
and that's what I was trying to say. Because like when a lot of us think of that, like when we think of Hickson, we think of Eddie Bravo, we think of Danaher, Gary Tonin, Ryan, the Ryan kids, and like all that. Like we think of those people having superpowers. It's weird when you get in there and you feel like, oh, you're just as strong as my buddy, who I've been training with for X amount of time.
Like here's the thing: when you go and you roll with somebody who's very well reputed, and you get demolished, it's an awesome feeling. It's like, okay, there's a reason that guy's so famous, so good,
right?
But at the same time, when you go and you kind of hang with them, it's also a good feeling because it's like, oh, this kind of like. This proves that I'm on the right path. Like, this isn't to say that I could, like I'm going to throw out a rant. Actually, I'm not going to name a name. Grappler X, famous Grappler X. If I go in there and I get destroyed by him, it's like, oh, well, that was the expected result. There's a reason he's, 10-time world champion or whatever. But if I go and I roll with that guy and I don't get destroyed, that doesn't immediately go like, oh, yeah, I'm as good as him. No, it's just like, oh, wow. Like clearly what I'm doing is not the wrong thing, because I didn't get destroyed. It could also be that he's having an off day or he's taking it easy on me. But you know what I'm saying? Like
right.
It's very validating when you build up someone in your head as being more than you, and you find out that no, they're really just like you. They just have a different focus, a different drive.
Mm-hmm. Does that give you confidence when you're thinking, oh, if I just keep doing this and keep working on these different things, I could be, maybe not just as good, but I could be up there with those people.
I can be good enough for me.
Yeah. Because, I feel like that's a lot of people's driving forces. Like, they want to, because if you're going to commit a lot of time to doing something, you want to be good at it. And you want to be able to be up there. You know what I mean? Like, you want to go, like, it's not like just selfishly, like, if I go with these high level people, like, I just want to give them a fight worth, rolling against. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just go in there and let you tap me like 5-10 times, depending on the, because that's kind of embarrassing.
Sometimes that's going to happen. You shouldn't be embarrassed by that. Like I said, they're that good for a reason.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm just like letting my partners down, like especially the higher belts. Like when I roll with you guys and you guys tap me 1,000 times, I'm like, like I feel like I'm learning here, but I don't know if you guys are.
Okay, so like that's a different conversation to have in a way, but like it's when I put it on somebody, like really really put it on somebody, okay, who's not as experienced as me. Like I'm not necessarily getting that much out of it, but at the same time I am, because like I'm getting sometimes reaction that isn't correct or isn't as sharp as, say, a high level guy, and that reaction is still useful. Like that's useful data. It's very very difficult to get good at anything against a guy who's like your equal and is shutting you down constantly. Like, sure, it's a great feeling when like you've got a good gym rivalry going with one of your buddies, and it's like, I finally tapped him. It's been like 6 weeks and I haven't, he's tapped me and I haven't tapped him or whatnot. Like I get that, but like you might have actually in that same amount of time made more progress working with somebody who was a lower level than you, that you could have gotten more in training reps on, that you would have been able to run your game on and see really like how it breaks down and works out. So like, while there's absolutely a huge value, like I really feel strongly about this, a huge value in that sort of iron sharpens irons mentality, where you want to train with like just the best guys that you can, and you want to push them as hard as you can, and they'll push you as hard as they can. There's also a lot to be said of working with a guy that isn't quite on your level, that you get to, try things on. Because like, you take like a top grappler in the world, he's probably got not a limited game per se, but he's got his specialties, the stuff that he's the best at, that's won him the most competitions.
Got him to the
his game. Okay. And like, here, I'll gladly say this because I've talked about it before. Like, the way I'm built, I'm not a triangle choke guy. Okay. Like I've got short legs. There's literally situations that I've been in where it's like I cannot close the triangle around this monstrously huge dude with his giant shoulder and head.
I feel like I'm a monstrous guy compared to you, and you've triangled me at least 2 or 3 times in us knowing each other.
I mean, I'm not an actual dwarf or anything. I mean, like I just got shorter legs.
As I'm trying to tell people, I'm trying to paint a picture here for everybody. So they're like, oh, this guy's like little bitty. No, I mean, like he can still triangle me. I'm 205 pounds.
Right. So I can do it. It takes a lot more effort. Perhaps maybe I haven't spent enough time with the technique relative to others. It's not my go-to game.
Yeah, but we were talking about
what you just said is actually
sharpens iron earlier
right.
too.
But what you just said is actually proving the point, because I have been able to triangle choke you because I was able to put in reps on something that wasn't my A game and still find some success. Now, if you were like right exactly on my level, pushing me as hard as could be, there's huge consequences to going off my A game if I'm in that, like must-win mode. And I'm not always. Like, I tap, like I'm not that guy that never gets tapped out. Like no, I'm taking risks. I'm trying things. I get caught, just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes a little bit more effort from my training partners than it did at one point in time. But yeah, and that's the way it should be. Like, if you're a top guy in the sport and you're not getting tapped by the guys in your room, you're not getting pushed.
Right.
That's just all there is to it. Or you're playing a really, really boring game. Like, I guess that's possible too. Like, if your shutdown game is as good as it gets, and nobody's getting those elbows to move even a millimeter from your rib cage, and you got the best base in the world, probably not the most exciting thing to do. Don't know if you're scoring with it, but yeah, maybe you haven't been tapped in just 6 years or whatever.
Hey, you do you, guy. You do you. You just be a shell. So let's wrap this up with
sure.
You're healing up from the injury. What's next?
So I guess this is August coming up real quick here.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah. So I'll be teaching a whole hell of a lot because, like I said, my coaches are going down to Brazil. So I'll be filling in quite a bit there for like 10 days at LCCT Schaumburg and LCCT Barrington. I'll be teaching the noon classes in Schaumburg. I'll be teaching the evening classes in Barrington. This is kind of fortuitous in a way because Masters Worlds, IBJJF Masters Worlds in Las Vegas is also in August, and I'm going to it. I'm gonna try to get that brown belt gold. This will be my first comp since the injury, and I've been working a lot of gi because IBJJF Master World is a gi competition. So I've been working a lot of gi work recently and really getting the reps in and trying to refine out that game and burn out a couple of dangerous habits that might get me disqualified, like my last Masters Worlds. Gonna try not to get called for reaping this time.
Man, I can't believe they still have some of those rules, and those are just gi rules, right?
No.
Are they still
IBJJF uses a pretty unified set of rules between gi and no gi. Unlike a lot of tournaments where it's like, we'll have one set of rules for gi and one totally different set of rules for no gi. So yeah, like IBJJF keeps those very consistent. The weight classes are a little bit different because you're allowed a weight allowance for your gi. So sometimes guys actually compete at a higher weight class in no gi than they do in gi because of that little bit of allowance.
So does that mean you're currently cutting weight for this?
I'm not like in a full-on cut yet, but yeah, I'm watching what I eat.
4 weeks away, sir.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's be very clear here. Like, this is not MMA. IBJJF, you scale right before you step into the match. It's not like you have a rehydration period. So, like, I'm not doing, like, some intense water cut trying to lose, like, 20 pounds or anything. I need to get down to, I think, with my gi on, I think I need to be, like, 137-ish.
Okay. For the 135?
No. Like
the
weight the weight class is 141.5, I believe, is the actual weight with the gi on, light feather. So the only complicating factor is, I had a little time off because of the injury and whatnot, so I'm walking around like 2 pounds heavier than I normally would at this point. Mm-hmm. I always freak out about the scale. Like, that's one of the only things that, like, really gets me paranoid. So yeah, like, when I'm 2 weeks out, if my weight isn't on track with exactly where it is, you're gonna see me just be like a total basket case about it.
I've seen you do, like, I want to say one hard cut one time, and you're just sauning it up, and I don't know, I felt bad for you, and I could tell you just weren't the happiest person at the time, because you're having to cut the weight and get in there and sweat it out. And
man, it's like, okay, first of all, again, like, there's real weight cutting where it's an intense amount of weight loss. Okay, like, when guys are, like, walking around at 225 pounds and fighting at 185 with a day before weigh-in, that's like a really, really intense cut, and I never have to do anything like that. Okay, like, when I talk about
5 or 6 pounds,
right? When I talk about cutting weight, we're talking about me having to, like, walk at 134 pounds when, like, I'm normally walking somewhere between, like, 138 and 142. Like, it's just I happen to be in between brackets a bit with my normal walk around weight, so I just have to be disciplined and lose a couple of pounds. It's not like a real weight cut.
But you still want to eat all that good food.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I don't want to have to give up like tasty stuff.
Yeah, to make me angry.
That's my reward for competition. That's my reward for being disciplined leading up to competition. Is after I compete, win or lose, I'm gonna eat all the foods.
Yeah,
all of it.
All the foods. All right, Jav, tell the listeners where they can find you. This has been great. I definitely want you back on. This thing can travel, so if I can travel to you if need be. So I appreciate you coming all the way out here to the dojo.
Sure thing. Glad to
chop it up with me.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely hook this up again some other time. It was a fun time.
It's fun. Like, the time flies. Now, like, I try to keep them around an hour, and I always go over. But give him your social media, and everybody go give Jav a follow and follow his journey.
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to see my collection of pictures with black belts, then Instagram is the place to go. So I'm the Jav13 on Instagram. I think you can just find me on Facebook by my name, but I'm one of those dudes that probably isn't going to take your friend request unless I know you. So if you wanna be friends on Facebook, come out and train with me. Say hello. Let me meet you face to face.
Yeah, I got some family that if they're ever up here, they would love to train with you.
Definitely. Let's hook that up.
So, all right, everybody, this is episode 11 of Head Kick Radio. Thank you guys for listening, and just enjoy this episode because this is one of my favorite ones. Like, I don't ever get to talk to this guy enough, and he just drops nothing but knowledge, and I know I walk away a smarter individual. So just imagine what it's like being on the mats with him. But episode 11, we out.